What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the E4 Explicit Podcast. And today I have Professor. Wow. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the E4 Explicit Podcast. And today I have Khadija Monk, PhD, who is a professor at Cal State in Los Angeles. That's why I'm repping the Lakers today. Super intelligent, very smart individual. I found her on a documentary about the 5 infamous serial killers: Gacy, BTK, Gary Ridgway, which is the Green River Killer, Ted Bundy, and Jeffrey Dahmer, who were all at the same time kind of actively killing. And she was highlighted in that show quite a bit, and she really was dropping dimes and knowledge, and I was really impressed by her. So I reached out to her, she accepted, and this is the episode that we produced. But man, we talk about some heavy stuff in here about serial killers, her experience, and we once again kind of deep dive into this world of the unknown, that, you know, the whys of why these psychopaths do this kind of stuff. And it's not just, oh, you know, they killed animals as a kid and, you know, their mom beat them or deprived them of love. There's a lot more to it, and we go over a lot of that in this episode. But it's fucking crazy, man, because these serial killers, they've done some crazy shit, and we talk about it. So you're welcome. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and also get that little bell notification going, so that way you get notified every single time my face comes on the screen, which is every week. So enjoy this episode of the E4 Explicit Podcast with Professor Khadija Monk. See you next week. Peace out. This episode of the E4 Explicit Podcast is brought to you by Bravo Concealment. Bravo Concealment is known for some of the best high quality and concealable holsters on the market. Located in the great state of Texas, they offer free shipping and unlimited lifetime warranty on all of their products, and a 30-day money-back guarantee if you don't like the product. I've been using Bravo Concealment for my gun holsters ever since I got into guns, and the quality is by far, bar none, the top notch in the entire industry that I've seen. And right now they're doing a buy one, get one free, plus free shipping, the 30-day money-back guarantee, and a lifetime warranty. On top of that, you, my friends, will get 10% off of any product, of any purchase on their website by using Explicit 10. Use the code Explicit10 and you'll get 10% off your entire purchase from BravoConcealment.com. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the E4 Explicit Podcast. And today I have a special guest, Khadija Monk, who is a criminologist and a professor at Cal State, LA. And thank you so much for coming on, Khadija. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. How you doing?
Pretty good. So we were chopping up a little bit before we started, but tell me, not me, because I already know who you are. Tell my audience, the listeners and watchers, who you are, what you do. You know, you work at, you're a professor, but what kind of professor? Just we'll dive into your life.
Let's dive into my life. Oh no. I'll give you like the short version. Yes. And then if for some reason we have to go into the long version, I can certainly do that. So yeah, I am a criminologist, and essentially criminologists sort of study, you know, crime and offending, and, you know, just the ideology of offending and what makes people tick. But really, I study a little bit more broadly than that. And, you know, the things I teach and the things I research are a little bit more involved. And so what I actually like to research is something called environmental criminology. And it's not like EPA violations, but what, you know, something like that. But it really looks at, you know, crime patterns. So crime concentration. So why does crime concentrate here? You know, why is crime here and not here? And so when you think about sort of, you know, crime hotspots, if you will, there is a, you know, temporal pattern, you know, crimes that cluster at a certain, you know, during certain parts of the day or certain parts of the year. And then, you know, why does this crime, you know, happen over here and not here? So spatial, you know, aspects of crime too.
Damn, that's crazy.
Everything has a pattern.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was a thing. So also you're talking about like maybe like low income communities. Why is it always happen? Certain crimes happen there, and then, you know, white collar crimes happening. Is that what you mean? Like,
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. It can be, you look at crime types, right? Because crime is not ubiquitous. We don't want to treat it like it's, it doesn't matter if it's robbery or if it's, burglary or rape. Each crime has its own like rhythm and pattern, and its own characteristics. Right.
Yeah.
And it brings its own sort of opportunity structure. And that's really why I'm really interested in it, because if you look at, when you're looking at crime, there's always a physical dimension and a social dimension, right? Because it has to happen in a place, right? And what's the social backdrop happening at that time that makes crime, more attractive there? And then physically, what does the space look like? Why is it so easy for this to happen?
That's crazy. I would have never thought that was even a thing. Like I understand like patterns and stuff like that. But I think of it as like patterns and MO and like certain things for the actual crime itself, and also like the perpetrator and the victim. That's what I would look at it. But that's crazy. I didn't even think that was like a thing. Like the area, like you said, environmental, you said?
Yeah, well, you look at crime events, for instance, like a robbery, right? And if you think about a robbery in your mind, you can blow it up into different components, right? The victim, the offender, the place, and how all those things sort of converge in time and space, right?
Right. That's crazy. So that's what you like to do. Do you get to do a lot of that or no?
I do components of that. So
Okay.
often, like right now, it's looking at sort of the crime prevention aspect of it. So you look at crime patterns in order to be able to figure out why does crime persist in an area, and then the policy side is, well, then how can we reduce it? So now that you know the components and how it happens and why it happens, and what are the conditions? Okay, how do we stop that? And so typically there are things that you can do, which is called situational crime prevention, right? So there's different elements of that. So it's not just that there's ways that you can decrease the chances of crime, and that can be something as simple as the way that you arrange your, your front lawn, the way that you physically alter your space to make it look a little bit more impenetrable, or you can, work with law enforcement, you can work with community leaders, you can work with your neighbors to find ways to, sort of band together and reduce crime. So I like to work with community groups and law enforcement to look at, like disorder and crime, like graffiti and, nuisance type crimes and all those things.
It's funny you say that, because that actually, I didn't know that part of it, but one thing is I'm like always like waiting for someone to break into my house. Like I'm always like freaked out. I'm from DC, so I lived in DC, and it's like a nice area, but like still it's a city, right? So I mean,
crime urban area is going to happen.
So it's funny because I'm like, I've always learned in all the research that I've done, I was like, okay, like last resort, they come in the house, I'm going to defend myself because I'm capable. But the first line of that is like like you said, kind of like having, even if I have security systems or not, having the signs out there of stuff like that, and lights on, cameras, certain stuff that like will deter, because most criminals, they don't want that smoke. Right. Really, they don't want that. They don't want to run into me in the middle of the hallway with a shotgun. They don't want that. They don't want drama. No one home. Exactly. So it's funny because I never thought of it though, like as in like the way you just describe it, which makes so much sense now, because I saw a lot of that when I lived in DC, of like environmental like crimes that could have been more than likely, like you said, kind of maybe prevented almost, with certain, like even those minor things like the stick in the grass in their front yard of like, the ADT or whatever it is going to be, that would deter someone for the most part. Having a light on that might not, if it's a pitch black house with no security, nothing really kind of, preventing them, then, I told myself, I made it very difficult for someone to get into my house. If they got in, they probably meant me bodily harm, not just wanting to rob me. Because at that point, I got signs everywhere. I've been like, listen, if you come in here, it's a rat. Like,
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that.
Well,
That's kind of crazy.
and I'm not explaining it as well as people that are, that are really, in the mix right now with researching it. But it is, I mean, the best way I can explain it too is like, it's sort of, along the lines of, industrial psychology and ergonomics even.
Right.
I explain it to students using an example that was given to me years and years ago. And it was about Disney World. And I've never been to Disney World. I've been to Disneyland, but I've never been to Disney World. And I guess, and I'm not sure if this is true now, but, have you ever been to Disney World?
I've been to both. Yeah.
So apparently Disney World might be in Orlando might be the, most densely populated place on earth at a particular time, right?
Wow.
It might be like the summer months or something like that.
Right.
And when you think about Disney World and the fact that it is, highly densely populated, and then you start thinking about Disney World a little bit more, you've got people from different countries coming in there. It's hot, it's expensive, you're waiting in lines for hours. Why? Those are the conditions for chaos.
A lot of
Why are people
stressors.
punching each other in the face more? And it's because they control your environment. They have set up the structure of Disney World to control you from when you're going in, how the lines are snaking, what you're watching, you're distracted, how they have, the people sort of like, the characters in the, all these things are done in a way to reduce the chances of, chaos.
Wow. Because that makes a lot of sense, because that many people, also the surrounding area, specifically in Orlando, there's like nothing else in that area except the parks. Everything around it boarded up, like not the best neighborhoods, a lot of trailer parks, a lot of like, not good areas. And then you have all these people, like you said, coming from all around the world to congregate in this one big area. That's crazy. That makes so much sense though. So they're trying to like dilute the potential of a chaos situation.
Absolutely. Because I mean, like you're waiting in line, it's like 90 degrees, and it's like it seems that normally you would want to punch someone in the face just for that.
Especially the Florida heat. No way.
Oh my, yeah, no.
The humidity. No. No, I hate it. Well, you know what is this then? So I talked to this is definitely diverted in a great way, I think. But I talked to a FBI agent, Johnny Grusing, and he's out here in Denver, and he was telling me he did a lot of bank robberies. He's on homicide, a lot of stuff, and school shootings. But we were talking about bank robberies, and he's like, listen, he's like, you would be surprised of how many successful bank robbers that I've interviewed, and what's turned them away is they've walked into the bank and someone was nice to them. And they said, hey, how's your day? And they said he's like, they turned right back around because they didn't want to do any, like, they don't want any interaction. They just tunnel vision, give me the money, I'm out of here. They don't want to have any feelings. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense because they're really there for the money. They're not there for you,
Right.
And that's why, we have to look at each crime type differently. Like bank robbery is very much different from commercial robbery, right? Or burglary, it's commercial burglary. I know, just say commercial robbery. That's fantastic. But like street robbery is very different, the way that happens. People will, it's one of those things where, sometimes they'll talk to someone and they're like, well, my house got robbed. I'm like, well, your house was burgled, right? But there's a reason, because each crime type has unique opportunities, unique aspects of it. And if you understand how the crime happened and what makes that crime more likely to happen, what's attractive about that crime, you can find ways to prevent it, right?
Right.
And what we know about, burglary, there's a couple great books, where there's a couple researchers, Wright and Decker. It's called like Burglars on the Job, I think, if I can recall. all the books that I have in my head, where it's an ethnography. They're essentially driving around with convicted burglars, people that spent time in prison for burglary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're driving around like East St. Louis, and they're sort of, asking, why, what house would you break into? Why? Why would you do this? And you learn so much. Like, I just remember reading that, and it makes so much sense. Um, it takes the fear out of crime a little bit, like crime happening to you, because I think when people listen to the news and they're hearing stories about crime, the problem is the way that crime is reported, particularly if they're using like crime rates, it sort of it makes it sound like everybody has an equal chance of being a victim of X, Y, and Z. And that's not really the case, because remember, crime concentrates in people, places, and things, right? Not every car is going to be, a target for auto theft, or, cars that are stolen for joyriding. It's different from cars that are stolen for parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you want a car for joyriding, you're going to get a nice car, right? And so where are you going to look for those cars? And,
Yeah.
if you want a car for parts, you're going to look for a Toyota, a Honda. You can get that, in a parking lot anywhere,
Right.
So it's different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as far as like what you're saying. Like, it's funny that you say that. It kind of takes like the scariness or whatever, or the worry about crime happening to you if you know about it, because it's almost like if you don't put yourself in those situations, which is kind of like so basic, then it's probably not going to happen to you. But it's funny because like I'm always I'm like ready, you know what I mean? And it's just like, I don't know if it's just because I know so much about I think it's like when you know so much about something, or the potential of like, wow, these things do exist, these types of people do exist. Like when I think about serial killers, I'm like, damn, like there's some really messed up people out there. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why haven't they come through my door? Why haven't I been, I don't know. I think it could do both. I think like it makes me more stressful because I know a lot about it, but I never looked at it like what you just said, which makes a lot of sense of like, if you know what to look for, if you know what not to do, if you know the type of environment, if you know why the crime happened, and not only just listen to the news report of it trying to make it kind of like blown up, I think then it can kind of really kind of help you kind of understand it more, or like kind of control like things. I don't know.
Yeah, but this will scare you a little bit more. So, we're
Great.
talking about, understanding, crime concentrations and your own personal risk. But then when we're thinking about personal violence, or, if you're, thinking about serial killers, the odds are, serial killers want to blend in. They want to look like part of the environment. And so that's the scary thing. Offenders want to blend in. Offenders, it's not like TV where, you can easily pick out the criminal because they're wearing black, or they look
super sketchy.
stereotype.
Yeah.
Right. And that's almost to the detriment of people that are really, I'm sorry, that's my cat.
No,
Is to our detriment, because we're always looking for the anomaly when the reality is like the harm is right in front of us, but it looks like everything else, right?
Right.
So,
Which, like, and we'll segue into serial killers, which that's how I found you. I saw you on Invisible Monsters, which is a documentary on A&E, which I thought every now and then a documentary about serial killers will come out every 5 or 6 years. That's just like, whoa, it looks visually amazing. All the interviews are fantastic, but this one really got me because as much like, and I have nowhere near as much knowledge as like you and FBI and all these people about these characters, but like as much as the population knows about these, the most infamous kind of like the golden age of serial killers, like I was blown away of like, I didn't know that all 5, Gacy, Bundy, BTK, Ridgway, and Dahmer, operated around like almost like we're killing in like the same years. I did not know that, which is fascinating to me. And then I just talked to Mark Safrick, who's an FBI profiler, and I always wanted to ask like a profiler or a criminologist, like, A, why do we not see any serial killers nowadays? And then he answered, he's like, obviously, like the times have changed. Like, they didn't have any of the stuff we have now.
Right.
So you still have serial killers, but you don't have 20-year
Yeah.
long serial killers. You don't have successful serial killers, I would say.
But yeah, and it's interesting because I mean, they're, and people think it's like an American phenomenon. It's not. I mean, there's, it's, serial killers are, as long as you're human, you're going to have some type of, serial killing. But it is, it's not just for Americans, but
Right.
I think they'll adapt. Offenders always adapt to technology, and they always adapt to laws, right? This is why, crime is sort of like a business, and stopping crime is always something. It's never going to go out of business, as long as we keep evolving with society, as long as society keeps advancing, there's going to be new crime opportunities. And then, there's going to be this period where it's out of control, and then, offenders will adapt. And, I didn't explain that very well. So what I meant was essentially, when there's something new, like the internet, right? Yeah. And this is like, for example, I used to teach a victimology course. Students would write about cyberbullying, like bullying was a new phenomenon. And I was like, look, no, bullying is not a new phenomenon. It's been around since there's been one guy that's bigger than the other guy. It's just, since the beginning of time. It's just the method has changed, right? And so the tools have changed. So now there's cyberbullying, right? But then legislation may catch up to, ways to stop cyberbullying. It may, or it may not.
Yeah, I think it has in a way. Yeah.
And then it'll move on to something else. Even our like durable goods, like cell phone theft and things like that. We make new, smaller devices, and some devices are more desirable than others. And so those will be the hot thing to steal. And then we'll find a way to make it better and more theft proof. And then offenders will find a way around that.
Yes, yeah.
It's like an endless cycle.
It really is. And you brought up the internet too. I mean, internet crimes in general. It used to be like if you were, I talked to a detective who was for crimes against children, and he's like, it used to stalk around and look at parks. Now we're on the internet all day.
Well, and it's awful because when you think about it, our criminal justice system, unfortunately, especially in the United States, is really it's like bricks and mortar. It's jurisdictionally based, right? And the internet is not. And so it's a hot mess. When you have a victim that's in Tennessee and you're in Denver, and, you can, commit fraud against them, and you've got these different jurisdictions. Our criminal justice system isn't set up to deal with the kind of, the multi-jurisdictional way in which, cybercrime happens, or the cyberspace rather.
That's exactly what he said. He said, when he's in Maryland, he works at the Maryland State Police. He's like, I have crimes happening in Kentucky that I have such a hard time getting to that person. And really just like what you just said. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's my understanding is the FBI is going to have to, work with, local police more, and local police are working with each other more. They have fusion centers where, you've got emergency responders that, fire and police, and there's more collaboration because we know we have to communicate now much more. And it's still not enough because, you have, predators that are overseas using, ISPs that, this is why, someone asked me like, why is there, why can't we do something about, kiddie porn or like child pornography? It's like, well, it's out of our jurisdiction. Sometimes, this stuff could be coming from Belgium or, I'm not to pick on Belgium, but like,
Russia, China, wherever. Yeah.
Right. It's, we can't just, there's international laws, there's international courts. It's complicated. It's much more complicated, even though the crime is essentially the same. Like here's, some graphic images of, a child. It's, technology is going to make things more accessible, but it also makes things harder at the same time, which is Interesting to think
100%. It
about.
is interesting. It's kind of like almost backwards, really, because it's like you know, what's okay in another country, not okay, but not illegal in the way that it is here. You know, you can't stop that from going on the internet and someone here finding that or seeing that. It's almost impossible to regulate to that capacity. And then you got the dark web,
Right.
which is like definitely not regulated
Not regulated at all,
at
but
all.
well, absolutely. And so, it's going to take us a while to get there, but we'll find a way to make the internet a little bit safer. It's just going to be a minute.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah. And then, like you said, once that happens, offenders will find a way to work around it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting that you were saying, this is why I sort of like these shows that look at, multiple serial killers, because they look at the social context. And they took almost like a bird's eye view. So Invisible Monsters, I really liked because it wasn't just focusing on one particular serial killer, but like the context of how they were operating, once again, in time and space and what it was like. I talk a little bit in some classes about South Central in Los Angeles in the 80s. And I talk about how, you had the Grim Reaper and maybe even Sam Little and Richard Ramirez operating in that area at the same time. You have like 3 serial killers potentially sort of in at that area while you have, drug wars going on, and you have such a heavy police presence, and they were still able to operate with very little.
None, basically.
Yeah.
It's funny. I wrote down Richard Ramirez here because I wanted to talk to you about him. That's so funny. That is what, because when I talked to Mark, yeah, those guys were in the golden age. They were in the 70s, late even 60s, some of them. When I talked to Dave Reichert, he was a King County sheriff. Yeah. He got to deal with Ted Bundy and Green and Gary Ridgway. So, yeah. But like both of them were like, listen, like, you don't understand, when we go do a case or we go to a crime scene, like you're talking hundreds of boxes of like paper. It's like impossible to even fathom. And then for him, for Dave or even Mark, that these kind of investigators have to have the foresight to be like, okay, this rope that's around this girl's neck might be good to use on DNA in 20 years. And they keep this kind of stuff. And, Dave's like, that's the rope that we used to get Ridgway because it had the Kentworth paint flakes on the thing, and it matched him, and we were able to get him 20 years later. But yeah, it's crazy that they have this, because they're not trained. They're like sergeants are like, hey, make sure you get that sperm cell, or, they don't tell them that stuff.
Well, no, I mean, and it also depends on the jurisdiction too, because if you are looking at, maybe like a smaller community where the police just don't have, the space, they're very limited in resources and money and budgets. Even if they wanted to, if there's a crime of that magnitude that happens, they don't have the capacity. Where are they going to store this information? Right. Who's going to, where can they send it? Who can analyze it? How long is it going to take? And, they know that technology will advance, but the reality is, they have to work with what they have at that particular time. And it might, the variability of police agencies across the country would horrify people,
Yeah.
I think people think that they're all very modern, like, on CSI and beautiful glass buildings and, latest technology. And like, I've been in some police departments where they have like one working computer, looks like a Commodore 64.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's always like, well, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? Like, victims' families and stuff like that. It's just, they don't have the resources. They don't talk a lot, especially back then. They definitely didn't talk. That's why like a Bundy was so hard, because Colorado, Utah, Washington, Florida, they're not talking to each other. Zodiac, same thing. Like, those jurisdictions aren't talking. And then you have that piece of it, but then like, I think in every one of those cases you had at least one investigator that really that was like a Dave Reichart. That was like a Frank
Yeah.
Salerno for Richard Ramirez. Like
Yeah.
the people that were really like ahead of their time almost. I mean, Salerno just got done with Hillside Strangler, so he kind of already had like a
Yeah.
little
So
practice.
a little.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
so is that a
absolutely.
thing? Do you think like the investigators? Because if you look at all those cases, there's definitely at least one or two investigators that just went above and beyond and made sure they preserved evidence and they really, I don't know, took
And
it
that,
personal.
you're right. I mean, there are a lot of those investigators around. They have the heart and they have the desire, but they are also working against the machine, a bureaucratic machine, right? And that's the other thing. I think people.
I have a bunch of holsters from Bravo, and one of them is the inside the waistband holster. So this goes inside the waistband if you want to conceal carry. Also, swap it out here, outside the waistband. So this outside the waistband is actually like hella thin, and you can see kind of like how close to the body it can get. You could take this on the range. You can probably conceal this and comfortably do it with, you know, a hoodie over top or whatever. If you want to open carry, it's up to you. They also send out mag pouches, right? So you can throw in an extra mag. You're going to the range. You don't have to unload and reload every single time. You got a little hollow point moment. They come in handy if you're on the range, like I said, or if you're concealed carry and you're one of those people that are gotta have a lot of mags or whatever. You know, whatever your cup of tea is. They also send you these really cool pamphlets. They go into great details in these brochures of how to wear things properly, safety mechanisms, and all the features that all of these holsters have as well. So they really focus on educating their customers, which when it comes to guns, safety and education are number one. They don't have any left-handed holsters except for the Glock 19. I'm a lefty, but the right-handed holsters are so dope and they're so comfortable and concealable that I don't really give a shit. Just learn how to shoot with my right hand. And right now they're doing a buy one, get one free, plus free shipping, the 30-day money-back guarantee, and a lifetime warranty. On top of that, you, my friends, will get 10% off of any product, of any purchase on their website by using explicit10. Use the code explicit10 and you'll get 10% off your entire purchase from bravoconcealment.com.
People don't understand that you know, to solve crimes, you have to work with an entire system too.
Right.
And if that system's not supportive, that really can impact the solvability of a crime in a lot of ways, you know. So I'm trying to, like, I've got a couple instances in my head, but I also have to remember, like, I can't talk about those just yet. So I have to wait, but, you know, but there are some police departments, you know, for instance, that really do care and want to solve certain crimes, but their budgets have been slashed. They don't have a department that can really deal with cold cases, or, you know, they don't have. It's amazing to see sort of what's happened to our police departments over the past 30 to 40 years. The way that some of them have been sort of systematically reduced to, you know, really just focusing on drug crimes and, you know, crimes where we're talking about missing persons or rapes or homicides have just been reduced drastically.
Wow.
It's
Why is that?
Unfortunate. The war on drugs. I mean, and that's the short answer. We lost our minds. What we did in the mid to late 70s and you know, the 80s with our not just with our laws, but how we changed our criminal justice system. I mean, one of the reasons why we're so overburdened now, excuse me, you know, why our prisons are overcrowded is because of the war on drugs, right? And what we did is we changed our police forces to hyper focus on drug crimes. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's what you're going to get. That's why you look in prisons, and by and large, it's not necessarily the most dangerous of the most dangerous that are incarcerated. It's drugs, you know, and this is why people, you're listening to, you know, like I listen to a lot of podcasts, you know, or a lot of crime podcasts, and I always sort of, you know, I feel bad when the the podcasters are so frustrated because they're like, this rapist only got like, 2 years. This person only got, X amount of years, and they killed someone, why is that? And somebody that is, a 3-striker with, a drug crime will get life imprisonment. And it's like, we've set our system up to hyper focus on drug crimes, and and now we have to plea bargain all of our cases. This is why, if you may have, committed manslaughter or something like that, plead out to, we overburdened our system, and now we have to take all of these shortcuts, it's a mess. And so that's going back to the example in South Central, in the 1980s, the amount of law enforcement that was occupying South Central is unreal. And I still say South Central, you could say South LA. There were just police everywhere. Right. And yet there were 3 serial killers.
That's crazy. I didn't know that. I only thought it was Ramirez, but I didn't even know the other 2 were operating at the same time.
Well, like, the Grim Sleeper, and then, Sam Little, some of his, he was so transient. He did admit to committing, some crimes in the South Central area around, it might have even been the 90s, I don't, his time, he is, the Grim Sleeper and him, like, if you don't know either of those 2, they're like, 2 Black serial killers, but they were prolific in their numbers of victims, just absolutely. And South Central was like their playground,
right?
But it's, I'm not blaming like law enforcement, but they were so hyper focused on, gangs, and which is a real threat, and drugs and that kind of street crime, that some of this stuff is, it gets ignored. And we also have to remember, even though we're all watching these shows, that serial murder really does make up such a statistically small percentage, like 2% or something like that of homicides. And homicides are statistically, rare events anyway. Right. So, when a police officer gets a homicide, they're not immediately looking for connections to other homicides. They have to treat each case, almost standalone until, that's really what they can do.
Right. Yeah. That's funny you say that, because I talked to Greg Kading. He's the guy, the homicide detective that investigated Biggie and Tupac's murder. 10 years after they were killed, though. But I asked him, I was like, we were talking about Frank Salerno and Ramirez, and I was like, how did he get the Hillside Strangler? And then he rolled right into that. He's like, that's the call he got that day. You never know. You go to the crime scene. You don't know that this murder of this 80-year-old woman is going to end up being Richard Ramirez and this crazy circus of events. I didn't know it was like that. I thought they were like, hey, you're seasoned. This might be a little complicated. Go do this. He's like, no, it's just like luck of the draw. He was eating dinner one night, got the call, showed up, and then it turned into Richard Ramirez. I was like, damn, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's sort of the amazing sort of aspect of, it really is, the luck of the draw, because these events, the way that they happen and how they happen, you cannot predict.
Right. It's so rare too. Like you just said, is like when I like Salerno, to get one like iconic serial killer kind of case and solve it in your career is like almost impossible.
Absolutely.
And then 2, and one of them being Ramirez, I just was like, holy crap, man. Like thank God though, because like I was saying earlier, it was like it takes a type of, I think, detective and investigator to really kind of like forward think. Granted, like in the 80s and 90s, they had a little bit more help with technology and stuff, not like the 70s and stuff like that. But I just feel like it was like the luck of the draw. But like if that was somebody else, maybe they wouldn't have caught him, even though he got caught by the people.
Right. Well, or it would have looked different, or maybe it would have been caught later or something like that. But the way that these things happen, it's you're right. It really is. It can be dependent on, who's working that day, and who gets the call. Do they have officers that are going to be able to follow up with particular leads? There's so many little components to these crimes, and a lot of shows, sort of like Invisible Monsters, really package it all together so that it makes sense. But it's not like that when that's happening to them. And I'm sure you've spoken to these individuals. It's almost like looking at a jar full of marbles sort of scattered across the floor.
Yeah, exactly.
And trying to make sense out of that pattern.
Yep, 100% right. Yeah, and I'm glad, like, you brought up the Invisible Monsters was the first documentary that I've seen with true crime that really kind of like you said, it was like a 30,000-foot look down on everything and the environment and the social interaction, and they explain like the technology and stuff. Like, it's not so much like the individual, like, okay, we all know Jeffrey Dahmer ate people and kept a head or whatever, and we all know those things, right? That's been played out. That's fine.
Right.
But I learned so much more about like the why and the how, and how they didn't get caught, and why they were so prolific in their era, based off that documentary, because it did such a good job of like talking to people like you had that's why I was like so blown away. Like your husband, you said, was on there, a couple other standouts that I was like, damn, like these, I've never heard it explained in this way, basically, is how I felt.
Yeah. And it's funny when you think about sort of like crime trends or something like serial murder or certain events, it always sort of helps sort of take a step back and look at what's happening in the background socially, because when we're looking at the 1970s and the 1980s, even the 1960s, it really was this transition in time where women were going to college more, they were away from their homes more, there was more freedom. And with that came this, sort of social change where people were, willing to, hitchhike, and it was just a different, it was a different era, but there are all of these opportunities, yes. Right? And so for serial killers looking for those opportunities, they were absolutely ubiquitous, because, it was very common to hitchhike. I remember, growing up, I think my mom and I would pick up a hitchhiker, right. Every now and then, not regularly, but right. I mean,
it wasn't out of the ordinary. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's funny because it's, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I would remember people hitchhiking. You would see them on the side of the road, right. And now it's something that if I see that on the side of the road, I'm like, Jesus.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. You see, it's so funny because when you see it now, when you see certain stuff like that, and I think it's the education because of those serial killers and what we all have learned, socially, and criminally too. But it's just like, the reason why they were so successful is because I think for the most part, the law enforcement had a terrible time of collecting it. They weren't working with jurisdictions, but right. Socially, like everything you just said is exactly why they were so successful, because it wasn't normal for kids to just, run away for a couple days or a week, whatever. And then by that time, the case is like, we didn't know the first 48 was so crucial back then.
Right. So. And I think that it's especially the way that sort of, especially for young men, and I think about like John Wayne Gacy or something, and the kids that, he would lure, it wouldn't be unusual in the 70s for someone to go look for a job in that way, talk to a guy about a job, or, the job, I'm going to go, over 2 towns, and I'll be back in a couple of days. I'm going to work on this job here and there. Like, jobs were different. How you got jobs were different. It's things have definitely changed. But what hasn't changed, and what I found fascinating, even when I watched this, like I know this from a research point of view, that you're more likely to be, a victim of personal violence. It's by somebody that you know. And when they say it's someone that you know, it doesn't have to be necessarily a friend, but it could be like an acquaintance, a neighbor, somebody, in your church or someone in your sports league or something like that. It's someone that you know. You're more likely to be victimized by someone that you know versus the stranger danger that you were raised upon. Right, now, those do happen, of course, but we're so busy looking at the stranger, we're not looking at the person next to us. And looking at, if you look at when they had all of those, all 5 faces sort of lined up, all of those men just blended in.
Yeah,
everyone looked like those guys. I had a hard time. I kept confusing, and it's funny because I know what these guys look like, but the Green River Killer, Ridgway, he looks like half of the police force.
He literally, with the stash, he literally looks like a cop.
I mean, you couldn't tell the difference, and so of course they're going to have like horse blinders on because they can't see that thing that looks like them.
Yes.
And that's part of the. And they're able to do that. And BTK, it's like that look, they just blend. They're like middle-aged white dudes that people will just walk past.
Yep. In the community, they're great people. They're, Hunter, that guy? No way. That guy wouldn't kill a fly. He's a freaking, yeah.
And meanwhile, you're crossing the street because there's like a long-haired hippie or, there's like, a black person or something like that, right? Because that's what society's told you is dangerous.
Exactly. Yeah. That's crazy. That is, man, I love talking about this shit. I'm sorry. So, okay, I got a couple more questions.
Sure.
What's his name I just talked to? He cleared it up. Mark cleared it up. But I was raised on, all the programs I watched about serial killers they always talked about what they had in common. And it was always, they wet the bed. They had terrible relationship with their mother. They were deprived in that way. Mainly they killed animals. But Mark was like, yeah, but that's been debunked. He's like,
the homicidal triad. Yeah,
triad is what he said.
Not really a thing anymore.
Yeah. I didn't know that until today. I was old when I found that out. I thought that was still a thing. So can you explain a little bit if you know about that kind of stuff? Or?
Yeah, I mean, again, and so I'm not a psychologist, but what I can tell you, and this is just, it's purely backed by research, but also if you look, if people are trying to look for the red serial killer flag in someone's background, the problem is they're not going to find it, because if you're looking at, is it having a domineering mother? Is it being neglected? The reality is, if you look in our prison systems now, everybody is neglected. Everybody comes from an abused background, but not everybody is killing people in a particular manner, right? They're not committing serial homicide.
Right.
It is this confluence of, and I was just talking about this to someone. It really is. It's like you can have a domineering mother, but the way that you respond is important. Right. So, it's this rage and this frustration and this anger, like pay attention to those more than like, were they abused as a child? I'm not saying don't pay attention, if you're not abused as,
right.
And suffer abuse, but so many people suffer abuse growing up. And for whatever reason, so why don't they kill? Right?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That is, that's a question that, there's a line of criminology that asks that, well, why aren't you committing crime, given your makeup, because there is this, this social, psychological, biological soup that has to have all of the right ingredients at the right time, to really explain someone's sort of, origin story, right? So, for example, if you're looking at, well, what went wrong in this person's life, it might be, when they're going through puberty, they had an experience where, their wires got crossed. And so now, violence and sex get, get crossed, and that sort of, propelled them. Like that would be a red flag. But, when we're looking at, home life and background and interest in school, or if they were super smart, there's so much variability that it's unsatisfying.
It's almost impossible to Mark basically said, he's like, it's the same thing with school shooters. He's like, just because this person's picked on, has XYZ, acts this way, doesn't mean they're a potential school shooter. It's like, it's not like he said the triad's like not like a checklist like it used to kind of be looked at. It was like a checklist. Like, okay, well, you killed animals, you had a deprived overbearing mother or whatever. It's like, oh, this person's going to be a serial killer. But you're right. It's like, there has to be like this perfect kind of like storm for it to work out that way.
Yeah, situational factors that we can't calculate. Right. So you have to get in a fight with your significant other in a very specific way, and they have to respond and push your buttons in a very specific way, and then you react. And these things you can't calculate. But one thing that does predict mass shootings is actually domestic violence, like their domestic violence history. And it's not school shootings, but like when you said that, it reminded me of like mass shootings. It's this thing of like, when you look at the characteristics, that's the one thing that they seem to all have in common, this issue of, domestic violence in some way, shape, or form.
Interesting. Like you're talking about like not a school shooter, but like a mass shooter, like a nightclub or something. Yeah. Or,
even, the guy in Charlottesville that, he drove his car into, this was like Charlottesville a few years ago,
campus.
Like even he had like issues with his mother, living at home. So there's like domestic issues there. It's like, those are important to look at too. But, for society, we don't, it's almost like we look at like violence against, women or domestic partners, and it can be men too, right? We don't really look at domestic violence in the way that we probably should.
How should we?
Definitely as a precursor to more violence. That's
probably true. Yeah.
Definitely more seriously than we do. But it's really interesting because it's such a phenomenon, serial killing, that we just want to pick it apart, and we really want to understand why someone becomes that way. And it just the more I learn about, like brain structures, like I said, like my husband does, he looks at, like the brain of these individuals, or, neuroscience, and it's very unsatisfying because it's so it's so idiosyncratic rather, if I can say that correctly. It's each individual serial killer, you really have to look, but violence is something that, a history of violence, I would say, is a good indicator just in general, and how they respond to frustration and how they respond when they're angry.
Right.
Those are things that are always red flags for me,
right.
In general. But
well, I have a question. You always see, especially those 5 serial killers that we're talking about, every one of them basically were saying how, I mean, they're all narcissists for sure, but they always said like, they talked about like Ridgway, especially. He said, I couldn't stop it. I had like the urge. BTK as well. BTK literally caught himself by believing the police officers about this stupid floppy.
I love that story. I love it.
So he could still be roaming around in Wichita right now.
Right, right.
But he's such a narcissist, like so smart, but yet so dumb to believe. Of course, the police are going to tell you they can't track it. Like, come on. But my question is, what is that? Because a lot of serial killers say like, I had the urge, or I couldn't stop it, or whatever. What do you know what that is, or if that's just BS that they're saying?
I mean, it could be BS, but it could be, it's this uncontrollable urge that, I've read about it. So it's almost like a drug addiction, almost, like or a cigarette, if you've ever smoked, that you can't, you want to quit, but you can't, because it's just, all of the things about it, you become addicted. You have flooded your brain with all the dopamine. Like that's when you are most, all of your senses are heightened. And that's when you feel alive, because when you look at those guys that all those five guys, for the most part, they're so mundane. Right?
Mundane.
They're so
boring.
They look like wallpaper. They really do.
Yeah, they literally
they've got these
grass
like
grow.
even Ted Bundy. He was his life would have just been beyond boring had it not been for his desires, right? They have to have, it's almost like they have to overcompensate for that mundaneness in their life. That's the excitement. And once they get hooked on excitement, it's like fame or something like that. It's addictive.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, BTK called it what, Factor X?
Factor X. Yeah. Yep.
Whatever you want to call it, or however you want to package it. It's an uncontrolled desire.
Right.
And unfortunately, it is for the macabre. All of us we're interested in true crime. We're interested in serial killers because it's essentially that car accident we can't look away from. Right. And, for them, they want to be in that accident. They want, they want to be the accident.
Right.
Because it's that compulsion is so much more intimate and so much more, it's closer to them.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I think like a Bundy, like you said, I didn't think of it until you said it, but like their lives they were all very, very boring, mundane. And then Bundy was also, but then like once he kind of got the fame, he kind of, I think like milked it and really kind of like ran with it. Very
absolutely.
like outspoken out of nowhere. And like, he wasn't really like that in real life.
Yeah, he wouldn't have, and the thing is like, it's, his career track, he wasn't going to be able to keep, he was going to college for law, maybe, maybe he would have been a lawyer, but by and large, he would have just slipped into regular old bland society, just like everybody else.
Right.
And so this is one of those things that sort of keeps them alive, and they think that they're above the fray because they can do this thing that many of us can, and makes it unique and special, but not really.
No, I do not want to be known for that. So, okay, let's talk about real quick. This is kind of sound weird. Not my favorite, but the one that really kind of, I had the heart, like I was just blown away. Was we already talked about him, Richard Ramirez. So every FBI person I talk to, every detective I talk to, everybody in that space, they always say, okay, well, especially the profilers are like, well, MO, behavior, all those things. Like if Bundy and all those people were around nowadays, they would have been caught within months more than likely, just because of all what we know. Now, Ramirez, on the other hand, he did not have an MO. He killed at random, like we're saying, like that stranger danger. He didn't know any of his victims, for the most part. He different weapons, different times, different demographics. It's extremely difficult to track. So, like, absolutely, what is that?
Well, and for that, it's like there was something wrong with his brain. That's like the short answer, and then if you sort of mix that with drugs and, he was just such a, I'm always, when I read stories about him and his like personal hygiene, his drug habits, and, it was so much easier to be a drifter too, and to fly under the radar, and to exist without money and having a job. And he was able to do that. Like, you just couldn't do that today.
No, right. You would stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so, but with him, there was something going on, with his brain, and then that, interaction with drugs and the psychosis and mental health issues. He clearly had mental health issues. His age range, from like children to elderly, as you were saying, he didn't have a type, or, that is something that you really have to look more like physiology, like look at his physiology, look at his biology and his makeup, like just, as they say, I always think that if they say in the country, like something ain't right with him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah.
Something ain't right with that
Something
boy.
wrong with him. Yeah.
Right. Something ain't right with that boy.
Yeah.
It's, mental health issues,
Right.
for sure. And that's the nice way to say it now, that
Right. Right.
there's clearly something beyond just a revenge or anger, or just it's how he lived his whole life.
Right. Right. Yeah. His life was very much like the
Chaotic
trajectory of it. Oh yeah.
yeah, and his killings are a reflection of that. Just very chaotic, very sort of who he happens upon again. But they have to have that opportunity presented to them, and
Right.
I think that's the part that probably scares people the most, because it is, you can't have a crime without opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't. Now some people can create their own opportunities, and like Ted Bundy, right? He can create the opportunity where he wears,
The cast.
he plays the role of an injured person. Can you help me? Then he's creating that opportunity.
Right.
But
rich way in a way too, because prostitution. So he put himself
absolutely
in that situation.
Exactly where to go, where the strolls are. You're a regular. You also know how society is going to view those victims too, right?
Right.
Especially when we're talking about, sex workers now. And sometimes those killers those are the ones that bother me the most, because they know that they can get away with those crimes more because of the types of victims that they choose, and that no one's going to investigate somebody with a history of drugs, and if they're a sex worker, if they're living out in the street, nobody cares about them, and so there's a disposability in that victim that they really prey upon.
Right. 100%.
Super insidious. So
yeah, that's like that. You're right. It's they oh well, I know they're not gonna have to spend the resources on this sex worker, that they're just going to chalk up to domestic violence or their pimp or whatever.
Right.
Not the Green River killer.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just, absolutely. And again, going back to, if I'm thinking about South Central and like the 1980s, and you have, Richard Ramirez, and you have, the Grim Sleeper, what you have are, their victims weren't necessarily sex workers, but they might have had, drug problem or something like that. And so, there were people that were ODing from drugs, but these women had strangulation marks on them, or they were found, without their clothes on. And I mean, you can't just chop everything up to drugs and call it a day, that's not gang involved,
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to your point of like the war on drugs, like how that kind of like just made law enforcement in general have tunnel vision, and they're not looking at, the Grim Sleeper of like, oh yeah, this person with strangulation marks, they also OD'd maybe on heroin.
Right. Maybe it was a gang initiation. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. They're not really taking that extra step. And that's where I think my point earlier of like the investigators that like really stepped it up kind of were like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That looks like this. And this is Richard Ramirez or the Grim Sleeper. Let's put these together and kind of like really figure it out. But so then what do you hi kitty,
I know, sorry about that.
No, you're fine. What do you think? So can you would you separate like Richard Ramirez with like the five and from like the golden age, because of the they also have something mentally wrong with them too, I would say.
Yeah, but they were also able to have a veil of at least a little bit of normalcy. They could carry on, they could have a domestic life. Like Richard Ramirez couldn't have a domestic life if he tried, right? He's not coming home, to a roommate like, hey, how was your day? That was, I wouldn't lump him in with them, just because they're normalcy was their shield, and he was not normal. You know what I mean? He's that anomaly where it's like he does look like the deranged, crazy person.
That's true. Yeah.
And for them, they wanted to, if we're thinking about Gacy and we're thinking about, Dahmer, even you just want to look like blah, and you may have a job. Dahmer didn't have like a prestigious job, but at least he had a job and an apartment. Richard was beyond even really having those things.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that actually makes total sense, because he was like an actual, like, just deranged person mentally.
Yeah, living in hotels, living in
Cecil.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just
Skid Row.
Low. I mean, just opportunity where he could sleep or where he could crash, and so that, I mean, and unfortunately, what happens is you just see one case like that, and then that's what sort of sticks to you. And unfortunately, he sort of happened right when Satanic Panic hit, and
chalk it up to that. And his murders were very chaotic and disturbing and satanic in nature, in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. No method or madness.
Right. Do you, this is kind of a weird question.
I'm used to weird questions.
Yeah. So okay. So you're a professor, you're a teacher, you have a lot of students. Do you ever, like, is that Outlook?
Yeah, I'm going to close it. I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize I had it on until I heard that
sound haunts me. The email sound. I know for work.
Oh, I hate it, and I usually turn that off. I can't.
It kills me. Now I'm like, it's like I'm going.
Yeah, no, I'm not looking at it.
Yeah. Do you ever think of like when you're kind of looking into your audience of your students? Do you ever look like, who in here would be a serial killer, or like tendencies or whatever? Do you ever like think of that stuff?
No, not. I mean, I think, in the years of teaching, I haven't really been concerned, except for like there was just a couple students, years ago that I would just be concerned with, like just the way that, what they wrote in their papers, how they presented themselves, they're few and far between. So normally I would never even look at my students in that regard. But I do think the one thing I do look at is sort of like victimization risk, which is bad. And I hate doing that, because I'm like, look, especially on a college campus, it's, if you have a room full of women, the likelihood of one of them being a victim of sexual assault is just, it's going to happen, know, and when you're in a room full of women, it's like 1 in 4 of them, will be a victim of sexual assault at some point in their time. And so, like, sometimes when I'm in a crowd, I'm looking at that, like, just sort of those risk factors, like, oh, geez, there's a lot of damage here,
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of potential.
Yeah, potential. But I don't, but I say that I don't look at my students in that way. And like when I'm teaching, I don't. But when I'm traveling, like in my daily life, I'm like the worst person to travel with, because I'm like picking out like crime opportunities left and right. I'm like, look, that person's counting their money out there. Like, that's a risk over there. That's, it's like this person, like, is not even paying attention to where they're going.
Right. Yeah. You'd be a perfect defender then, because you know what to look for then, I guess.
Yeah.
Like picking it apart.
Look, this person is walking with a map that they're asking to be, mugged. It's just things like that. So
that makes sense. I mean, it's kind of hard to, it's kind of like, for example, for me, I'm like a filmmaker, right? So, I mean, I don't do film anymore like I used to, but it's like, I can never watch it. I'm the worst person to watch a movie with. Like my fiance, she's like, I don't care how they shot this. Stop ruining it for me. Like, you're taking me out of this experience. I'm like, yeah, but it's like, that's why they, same thing for you. You're like picking these things out, and your person you're traveling with is like, okay, great. Like, thanks.
How, well, usually it's my husband, and he's like,
he's probably the same way. Yeah. So it's like,
that person's a serial killer, but no, that, what's really, we're great. We're really great together. But it's funny that you say that, because when we're watching, movies, like obviously, like, when there's a show and someone's like a psychologist and they're doing things, he'll look at that. But like the movie that I can never like I've only seen the first one, and it's The Purge, and I hate those movies on their premise alone,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I'm like, what they're saying is that people can, bust out their day planner and schedule crime. Like that's
Right.
not how,
That's not how it works.
and I always use that as an example in class.
That's a great example.
It's, I'm gonna, control my rage until October 31st, and it's
Right.
just, we can't do that. None of us can do that,
Right.
And so with crime, I just think it's even more ridiculous. Like that's not a solution.
No, yeah, it's like get it all out, get it out. It's like, Paul, you
yeah,
can't. That's interesting you say that, because I never thought of it like, because I only watched that first movie too because I thought it was so stupid. But like, I was like, damn, is that a good idea? Maybe because there's so much pent up. But you're right, like it's all crime. Like some people, I think I've heard detectives say like, oh, this is a crime of opportunity. Every single crime is an opportunity, is a crime of opportunity, right?
Yeah, and it's also, when we're thinking of homicide too, we have to realize that the majority, like the workaday homicide that goes, that the criminal justice system deals with, isn't the sexy serial killer sort of planned stuff. It's often like a bar fight that gets out of hand, or we've had one too many drinks, or you punch the person a little too hard. The difference between a felonious assault and manslaughter is just what happens with the person. And so it's to say that there's calculation to the extent where people are so sophisticated that they're planning out these crimes, that's not always the case. I mean, we all are working with our limited, what they call bounded rationality, is the information that we have at the time to make decisions. And sometimes, if you talk to killers in jail, like these were the options at the time,
Yeah.
This is the reality that I was living at the time when I committed this crime. It's, right. Those were the tools that I had available to me, anger, right. Rage,
Well, even the five that we've talked about, like they even say, like Ridgway, the girl that survived Ridgway, he's like, some of them are like, I didn't even want to kill that person in that time, but I did because of the situation that happened. The opportunity was there. It wasn't like I went out to do it in this way, shape, or form. It just happened that way.
Yeah, and then something happened at that particular place and time, that that situational thing that's right in front of you that comes together, all of these elements come together perfectly.
Right.
And that opportunity is suddenly there that you just didn't see it, and you take it. Right. Maybe it's been a thought in your mind and you played it out. I'm sorry. It's
Fight Club.
It's Kitty Fight Club. Sorry.
That's awesome.
Love it. But yeah, it's this, it's that immediate situational factor,
right.
that determines what you're going to do next. Even if you think of, like, say, Ted Bundy, remember how he had this typology of, white women with blonde, or brown hair parted in the middle. And, the origins of that can be traced to his girlfriend that rebuffed him, in college, or, what if she would have been a redhead, or what if she would have been something else? It's that you couldn't have predicted that.
So you're saying that, because I know that theory very well. So that's not, you don't think is as true as what they kind of rub it, because it's a sexy thing about his case. It's like, oh, his girlfriend looks that way. He treated her a certain way. He got rebuffed by her. And it's like, you're right. If she was a redhead, would there be more redheads that were dead?
It might be. And that's the thing, we won't know because, reality has played out differently. It really is that, but also that's what a lot of women look like in the 70s.
Right. The parted hair.
The other thing,
exactly. Right.
So when we're saying typology, we're like, just like today, if there's a serial murder and all the women look like Kim Kardashian, it's like, because that's what women look like right now.
That's true. Yeah. That's exactly right.
It's like that long hair, big eyebrows, high cheekbones or whatever. That's what's happening right now. And well, maybe not right now. I don't know what's happening.
You're not on Facebook, so you wouldn't know what's going on. No, but you're right. It's kind of like it's the social of it is kind of like the reflection of like the crimes, why, all those things that we're talking about. Like, you're right. Like because it's funny because when you have all the shots of all the girls that Bundy killed, yeah, they all look similar. But to your point, not almost everybody, but a lot of women look just like that.
Yeah, that was the look. And
That
then,
was.
and then the guys, looking at the guys, they look the same. They all look like cops back then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's funny because it's like, I talked to Mark about this too, about like because not everyone, but at least in the United States, it's like, who's a serial killer? There's very rare. I can't even name any, except for Ramirez, like any people of color that were serial killers that are as prolific as the 5 that we've been talking about. And it's like, is that because like that's like how the media portrayed it, and it was just kind of like, because when you joking around as a kid, it's like, with the crazy like white kid or whatever, like, oh, that's going to be a serial killer. It's like, but like you said in the very beginning, and Mark said the same thing, every culture, if there's humans, there's going to be serial killers. It doesn't matter what color.
Right. And there are Black serial killers. I mean, Sam Little is still one of those ones. I mean, he's alive now. He was prolific. His numbers, I think, might be. I'm going to be wrong, and I know that there's probably somebody that would listen to this that's going to know the exact number of his victims. But I mean, he was crisscrossing the United States for a good 20 years. And he still, he was a Black guy, but he also blended into his environments. He killed white women. He killed mostly Black women, depending on where he was, Tennessee, Florida, California, because he always went to the places where nobody would bat an eye at him. Like he did, he just looked like a regular, middle-aged Black dude.
Right.
He didn't look like a gangbanger. He didn't look like, and which worked to his benefit in the 80s, because everybody's looking for, like the, gangsters. Everybody's looking for somebody that looks different. He just looked like a regular old Black dude.
Right. 93.
Yeah.
He said he's confessed to 93.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And, but a lot of his victims, again, they weren't all sex workers. They weren't all, because it's a crime of opportunity. He's going to get the accidental nursing student. He's going to get the accidental housewife. He's going to get, it's going to be mixed in with, the people that, he's targeting.
Right. What he got, it says that he was, it says active span of crimes from 1970 to 2005 is confirmed, but 1960 to 2012 possible. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this person.
Oh my God. There's a few documentaries on him, but and when you look at him, I mean, like he just looks like old.
Yeah. Uncle or grandpa.
Yeah, he again. So even the stereotype of like, it doesn't matter your ethnicity, you're going to blend in because that's how you lure your prey. It's almost like, nature replicates that too, because like Venus flytrap, or like, there's animals that look like their environment so that they can catch their prey. That is exactly what we do.
Wow. That's crazy. I never.
Yeah.
He does blend in. He looks just like a cool grandpa.
You would not think. But... Yeah. You would. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. The
again,
cat's like,
with the
feed
cat.
me. No. It's literally over your
your
shoulder. It's perfect. They're fighting. Yeah. You have like a secret
one
cat
stalking
ring.
the other, actually.
Yeah.
Look at that.
This is great. No, this is crazy. I'll let you. We've been talking for a while. I'll let you go. I just have a couple more questions.
Sure.
Why not the FBI? Why not join the FBI?
Oh, geez. Well, for me, I mean, look, the reality is I got into the PhD game a little bit later in life. I had different iterations of different lifetimes before.
Okay.
When I was an undergrad, I was a psychology major. I actually wanted to be a forensic photographer, believe it or not. Like, in high school, I had my own dark room. I was really into photography.
Cool.
And that's what I wanted to do. Never thought about, joining the FBI, mainly because I had these other interests, ancillary sort of jobs. I wanted to be the forensic photographer, then I wanted to get in psychology. I had a special agent come to one of our classes, I think, when I was in undergrad years ago, and sort of talk about the job and the mechanics of the job, or something that I was like, no, that's not for me. And, to anyone else, go for it. But I am I don't really, want to shoot anyone. That's really not, that's not my,
Yeah, most people don't.
But most of the FBI, you're investigating, right? And so, but at that time, when I was young, I didn't want to be, I don't know, I didn't want to be an agent that could be placed in like Omaha, Nebraska. I wanted to be able to go where I wanted to go.
Right.
And you really don't really have that sort of freedom when you start out with the FBI. It's not like the people that are so, like Mary, I think it's like Mary O'Toole and people that have worked for the FBI as profilers, doing other really interesting things. They had a lifetime of being like, a cop in another city for a while. And, then they had, positions in St. Louis for 5 years before they got to, the thing that made them famous. So, and it's not to say that, I would never want to live in Omaha, Nebraska. It's just, I had a different sort of vision for my life, and I ended up taking a bunch of left turns, right? Working in the finance industry, and then doing a bunch of other things. And all of that has sort of gelled together to make me the person that I am now. But I'm not good with, I'm also not a joiner. I don't like, like
authority too. I feel like.
I'm not, one of the things I've learned throughout my life is that I'm not good at a 9-to-5 job. I don't do well in an office environment. And, and it's only through having those jobs and realizing, what you're good at. I'm good at puzzles and thinking about things and problem solving, but not office work. And I think that was something that was sort of like a turnoff for me, because the person that came to speak to the class sort of left an impression that it really was less sexy. And I think that was their job, because they want to weed people out.
It is less sexy. Any of this, I wanted to be a homicide detective forever. And I went to school for criminal justice for a while. And then I joined a police academy, and I'm like, okay, I hate authority.
That's going to be bad.
It's not going to work for me. And then I got to be a beat cop for probably 10 years, because the area I was looking at was like, the cops, there's like 2 homicide detectives, barely any murders. They're not going anywhere for like 30 years.
And you're not going to get all those skills that you need. And that's exactly it. It's like you sort of look at the reality of the job. It's like, the civil service exam sort of has it sort of set up to where, you really have to make these very planned moves. You have to know in advance. And in some ways, like for me, I ended up doing what I love, not because I stumbled upon this and it worked very hard, but, I wasn't 18 and I was like, I'm going to do this. And I didn't have a linear path to what I was doing.
Like a traditional kind of.
And so, but I like it because, I have all of these different, tools under my belt that I can use to solve problems, and I can see things in different ways. Like I understand financial crime differently because I worked in the finance industry, and, just having all the jobs that I have, I work at a radio station and, things like that. All of it has sort of helped me understand like deviancy and crime and who bad people are, and what they look like, and who the bad people really are. I always tell students I'm way more afraid of a guy in a suit than I will ever be, with a guy with like chains and
the stereotypical type.
Exactly.
I
always fear
agree
the
with
suit.
you. Yeah,
So I
yeah.
did, yeah, it just wasn't it's like the authority, like it just wasn't me, and I'm
Right.
not to say that that isn't a viable path. It certainly is for people, but I know that I wouldn't have been any good at that.
Right. No, that's great. I'm similar to you. I was like I had multiple jobs, but like all of those things kind of cultivated to like get you where you're at and
Yeah,
and today.
yeah,
Totally. Yeah, no, I love that. And it's funny because Mark said he's like, because I asked him, I'm like, well, like off camera, I was like, because the FBI is like, I know you don't, if you're a field agent, like they just pick you up and drop you wherever they want.
yeah.
Is that he started his first 11 years, he was in Wyoming on a native
Or
reservation.
tribal territory. Oh, yeah,
And I'm like, what?
exactly.
That.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm saying. So like, and especially for like, not to be so stereotypical, but I think like even as a woman, I'm like, well, what does that mean for relationships and people? And can I
Highest
go
divorce
out?
rate.
I think I was very selfish. I was like, well, can I go out and have a
Yeah.
good time?
Yeah.
Oh, I
It's
can't,
yeah, no, you're right. It's because that's one thing that kind of turned me off too after a while. Because I looked at the FBI as well. I'm like, wait, the FBI homicide detectives,
Yeah,
people in those industries like have like the highest divorce rate, high suicide rate, high stress.
yeah.
And I'm like, damn, like I'm already like an anxious person. I was like, last thing I need to do is be in a situation where I gotta potentially kill someone and like shoot the ground and then I'm dead. Like, so I was like, I'll pass. Let me just go make movies instead. My mom was like real happy. Uh,
The safe job.
yeah, I'm
But
gonna go be a
yeah,
filmmaker. I'm gonna make millions of dollars. Yeah, right. But
yeah.
it is what it is. But no, that's I just was curious because sometimes I talk to people like you who are professors in certain industries. I'm like, why not go like the criminal like route if you're gonna capture them, but you're so fascinated with them.
Yeah, and plus I like all the other stuff. I like the all of the like the social concepts
Mm,
of crime, like, why is this particular crime happening at this time? Like just um all of the I think dealing with only offenders, um oh, I'm so sorry.
you're good.
Like dealing with only offenders is only really looking at one piece of the puzzle,
Yes.
because you have to look at, why victims can tell you so much more about an offender than just looking at the background of the offender,
Right.
right? Their choice in locations, their habits, all of those things. And that's not necessarily something that I just didn't want to focus only on offenders.
Right.
I wanted to sort of look at like the whole picture.
Right.
Um, and so that's really, what I wanted to do. And plus it's more, I have more flexibility, but I've worked with law enforcement for many, many years, and the best homicide detectives are those that they talk to everybody. They talk to everybody on the street. I mean, it's a personality thing.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's one of those things that I don't think they teach at the academy. Like you have to have something, you have to have a curiosity about people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that, maybe people get into, the criminal justice system, to make things better, but they don't have a curiosity about people. And I
Right.
think that's when it's like not a good fit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think like back in the day when like ride-alongs were cool and like it's just the image of the police officer is so different now. It's
Yeah.
all negative almost. And it's like back in the day, regardless of the neighborhood, it was like they were a part of the community, they were respected, they were just treated differently.
I'm going
Mhm.
to say this. I'm going to say it's never been a good time to be a police officer in the United States. It just never has,
Right.
because of the nature of the fact that they are, they're agents of the state, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is just essentially. So they're never going to be. It's whether it's the 60s, whether it's the 40s. I mean, there's always just um, social change makes it so that we're always going to push back
Mhm.
on authority, right? And they're in that unfortunate position of having to enforce laws by the state. And it's bad now, but also in the 60s during the civil rights, I
Oh
mean, it
yeah.
was
Yeah.
pretty bad. And during oh my goodness,
The
the
riots
turn
in
of the
LA.
century, in the 1900s, it was just
That's true.
brutal.
Yeah.
It's never a good time. It just never is. But you do bring this really important point that you got to have a personality.
Do.
You have to be curious, and you have to be curious about people, because that's the thing that you're never going to solve a crime. You're going to solve a crime, but you're never going to be that person that shines if you're not a people person. And so right now I have a concern, because we're all, COVID, we're stuck behind screens, and we're becoming less social in a way, even though we're more connected. It seems like we are more connected to people, but we're less social, and we don't know how to talk to each other anymore.
It's weird. It's so funny you say that, because like when I started my podcast, I was doing everything in person, 3 cameras set up, like it was great. And I felt like it was way more personal, because I could really, like, it was there with the person, so I could pick up on weird cues differently, and just like social awkwardness. And sometimes it's like you don't know, because a lot of times that I'm talking to someone, they're highly academic, highly intelligent, they always don't have those personal skills.
You have to well that's the thing. I always wanted to be the professor that I say that the professor I never had, but I had some good professors, but by and large, they were all, old white dudes.
Yes.
And I wanted to be like an accessible professor, right? Somebody that you can take those very complicated concepts and sort of put them into layman
terms.
It seems to do more good, the more that you can, because nobody reads academic journals. They really don't. It's just, I think that we do more service, like doing even like TV shows where we're talking about something. You learn more doing that almost, or you get the word out more, and then people can read your boring academic stuff. But if the idea is to help and to change, it's not going to. We're not going to do it as academics sitting in our bubble and only sort of talking to each other.
Right.
It's nothing. It doesn't interest me. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. You couldn't be more right, because it's like, as someone who was terrible in academics, it's like I always drifted to the teachers and the professors who wanted to kind of come down to my level, understand me, understand my likes, and certain, like, how I tick, versus like just like the stereotypical standard way of teaching. And those are always the classes that I killed in. It's so weird.
Yeah, it is. Well, because you have to be engaged. I'm similar to, we were talking about, like, you have to do the thing that you love, and then anything else is sort of boring. Like I can't just, if you just dry lecture everybody, I lose.
You're doing the lecture.
So, like, I at least have to entertain myself. So, I've been teaching on Zoom the past semester, and none of my jokes are landing in a social environment, but at least I'm entertaining myself, and that's great. It's like just a screen of names, and I'm just like, just.
No, I agree with you.
I can entertain myself, but
you're right. It's definitely like we're less connected. Or we're less social, but more connected, and it's easier access, but it's still like, it's not the same. And as someone like me, and you sound like the same, like I want that, like, person to person. COVID sucks, but I'm like, God, man, like, I can't. Granted, I could not get to you. I couldn't interview. I'm not going to LA. I don't my pocket. I don't make any money off this thing. Like, I'm not going to be able to fly. That would be a total I can't do that. So like, this makes it easier for me to talk to people. When I lived in DC, I had access to very interesting people that I could just drive an hour to and talk to. I can't do that in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like, when I lived in Boston, I can get on a train and go to New York or something like that. But it's, it's in some way, this has helped us, but it's not the cure at all. And this is, so when we go back to talking about like serial killers and really sort of understanding these individuals, the problem is we have to have this sort of shared idea of what society is, and we're so disjointed now. My fear is that people are going to walk past us and we're just not going to see them. these potential killers, right?
Right.
Because we are all in our own little world. We're not sort of engaging in a way that we can sort of see like bad behavior, like red flags, you know what I
Right.
mean? I'm just hypothesizing, and it's just a fear of mine, It just seems like we're going to be less in tune with people, which means we're going to be less in tune with, the really bad people that we
Right.
need to be, sort of
Watching out for. Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with you. I think it's so much easier to mask yourself now because you have this digital platform where you can, it's just like the whole classic, like, and Instagram and stuff like that. It's like this lifestyle that just people are living. Like most of those people are miserable. They're not happy. They're not rich. They're not glamorous. But now
Yeah.
you can do it in almost every aspect of your life with work, with social.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think you're right. It's like a lot of like, you can mask way easier now than maybe you could if everything was in person or you had to kind of show
Yeah.
who you really are, if that makes sense.
No, that's, you're absolutely right. And so, moving forward, and when we think about the fact that, okay, we know that if we're, that there are very bad people that are around us, they look like us, they're mimicking us, and they have bad intentions, they're looking at the exact same thing you are, but they're looking at it with a different lens. Like,
Right. Right.
like it's concerning. And so
It is.
it'll be interesting. So 30 years from now, we'll be looking at a different type of serial killer, like,
Interesting.
there may be more Craigslist type killers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Yeah. I didn't think of like 30 years from now, like what kind of serial killer, like what will the serial killer, like, 30 years from now, those people aren't going to like, Ted who,
Yeah. It'll be one that's been on a dating app of some sort,
Mhm.
or takes advantage of certain groups, or like next door or something like
Uber.
that, or
Yeah.
somebody that embeds themselves into a community of some sort.
Right.
They're gonna use technology to their benefit,
For sure.
and technology is going to be what ends them too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then I know a new offender will come out and figure something out.
Exactly.
One last thing, if you want to talk about it, you mentioned you were involved in surviving R. Kelly.
Oh yeah.
So were you just like talking about like the psychology of it, or like the criminal background of that's like, what was that about?
Well, so that was, oh my God, and I have to go back in the Wayback Machine, but first of all, I think when I was actually asked, I was recommended for that, because it's funny, because they interviewed my husband, but he didn't make the show, which is fine. But he's like, hey, I know somebody you could talk to, and I ended up like really hitting it off with the producer and thing like that, and and we sort of spoke. And
Interesting.
my role, I really wanted to talk about sort of the victims, and maybe why, and what I did talk about essentially, was why, R. Kelly would be able to do what he did, and how he could manipulate these women, and how it, in hindsight, it looks with these young girls, rather, how, the music industry certainly masks and protects a lot of really problematic people, right? Because as long as you're making money, they're always going to look the other way.
Of course.
And it's going to be at the, unfortunately, not, it's going to be to the detriment of women,
Right.
and men, they get taken advantage of. And so I really looked at sort of like victimology in that regard. So, I looked at, what, how he was able to prey upon these young girls who wanted to be, just anywhere in the same, circle as R. Kelly, because music and musicians were so, getting into the music industry was so much harder.
Oh yeah.
In the, in the 80s and 90s, when he was really prolific, like even in the, like, the African American, or the Black community rather, I was really startled to see that they were talking about R. Kelly. I'm like, oh, everybody knows that. Everybody knows he's, this kind of guy. Everybody, why are we talking about him in 2019?
Right. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I was
I
like,
didn't know he
nobody's
was
going
like
to
that.
watch that. Well, when I thought, I'm like, no one's going to watch this. I mean, everybody knows that. And it just, it turned out that everybody watched this, but everybody watched it. And I was really surprised. I was like, how do people not know this? And he's, the worst kind of offender that preys on members of his own community and in a way that, it's just awful, just absolutely awful, and it's essentially invisible because it's, he can go to Chicago, he can, pick up young girls that want to be stars and he can mentor them and then he can abuse them. And it
no
looks
one's gonna say
normal.
anything. So it looks exactly. It's kind of like, it's like a Weinstein thing. Like at least in Hollywood, that's another thing that turned me off is like, I knew, like, okay, for example, when Kevin Spacey came out, like all his stuff, I literally was like, okay, and this is like, he's bisexual. Everyone's known that. I mean, but then everyone didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, in this industry, that's like normal. And it's like, I know people that worked on House of Cards that Spacey would go up and grab their ass, and like, what are they going to say? Were they going to go to the director or the producers and be like,
well, and that's the thing. If people don't realize that, and especially if you have not grown up in the music industry and you're an aspiring singer, or you haven't grown up in and I would say, even people that grew up in the television and movie industry still fall prey to this. But if you don't know it, you don't know how the sausage is made. You don't realize that this person is grooming you for something else, right? You don't, you think it is normal, that they work really hard, that they have this work ethic. So, 2 a.m. sessions, well, I guess that's par for the course. Right. But in reality, there's an ulterior motive. So you wouldn't know that person has bad intentions because you're really looking to them for guidance and how to navigate an industry that you've only dreamt of and you've only seen one aspect of.
Right. 100%. Casting Couch is a perfect example of that.
Oh God, yeah.
We always would joke in like in college and stuff, like, oh, let's do some auditions and get a casting couch, not even realizing what we were saying. We're like, wow,
sure.
That's kind of like, that's a thing where, like, young women will come in, they think they're going to get this great role, and Weinstein would be like, well, you're doing this first, and
right,
you're not going to get it. No one's going to ever hear from you again.
It's
fucked up.
And the thing is like, we just don't want to believe that that's like, when you look at, really highly successful, especially like men of a certain age, you have to realize there's a lot of collateral damage behind them for them to get to the top like that, and I'm not, it's just, we just don't want to believe women. We just don't. Right. And this is, it sort of makes me think about, when I was talking about domestic violence, it's like, we just don't want to address it.
Right.
And we just don't want to believe that there is a problem, and really there is. And, and it's only when you get these cases like R. Kelly and like Weinstein and, and Epstein and, it's and then we're still shocked,
I know. And it sucks though. I think it's like the times too is like, I talk about when I put my tinfoil hat on with my friends and on the podcast, when I talk about conspiracy stuff, about specifically Epstein, is like, it's just Ghislaine Maxwell right now is on trial. She just got convicted 5 of 6 counts. I didn't hear about it in any national, literally like the biggest kind of like case in the last, I don't even know how many decades, nothing about it. And it's like, the 24-hour news cycle. It's kind of like when a school shooting happens. Oh my God, it's so sad. I did my heart emoji on Facebook. Okay, now I'm good. Like I did my part. I feel like back in the day, it would have been like, there would have been much more accountability held, because there's like nothing now.
Yeah, and you're right. I think part of it is, the news cycle has diluted us. It's so diluted. And also none of us have a shared sense of what's happening in the United States at the same time. There's something to be said for, growing up in the 70s and 80s, and there's 3 channels and everybody gets the same news at the same time. And so we're all on the same page and we can experience something at the exact same time. True. And there's something important about that. Now, we don't experience things at the same time. We watch it at our convenience. And so what's happening is, someone's getting outraged here, someone's getting outraged 3 months from now, someone will get outraged about this, 5 years from now. Right. And that's sort of what breeds like a cancel culture, not that we're starting to look at the behaviors of something or a news issue that happened that was really important, but we just didn't pay attention to it at the time. And now we're paying attention to it and now we want to cancel it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. What do you think about cancel culture?
Well, it's the problem is that everything that all of us are saying now in 30 years may be unacceptable. And so I think that there's like there's definitely some things, with cancel culture, it's bad because we're not allowing the person to really sort of sit in their own filth. They're just canceling them. Like sometimes I think, I'm a person that always likes to at least have some sort of lesson be learned from some sort of catastrophe. Right. So, so here's a touchy subject. So we're talking about like police involved shootings, unarmed Black men, or just Black people in general. There is sometimes, there is this idea that, we have to fire this person immediately because of something they said. And for me, I'm like, well, maybe what we should do is sort of make them a spokesperson, maybe sort of really, instead of like firing that person, maybe we should, find a way to make that person really, pay like almost on the daily for that, like you keep your position, but now you have to advocate for the thing that you really disparaged, if that makes sense. And
no, that makes total sense.
But police shootings are one thing, but like there are it's tricky, because in 2020 we all had this shared moment of watching George Floyd and being outraged, and you saw what could happen when we all are watching something happen at the same time right in front of our face.
Right.
And now we're sort of back to being disconnected and hearing about things, at
our leisure.
And nothing's happening. There's no social movement forward.
Right. I agree with you. And I think there's another part of that, to your point earlier about like instead of just firing the people in cancel culture, I think like there's good, like with George Floyd, it was something, he died. That's bad that came out of it, but something good did come out of it.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of like, okay, well, there's a lot to say of like when we all are looking and all fixated on the same thing. It's something, especially now in today's world, everything happens so quickly that we're not having the time to like think about the decision we're about to make. We just make it, and then we don't know if it's bad or good.
Well, absolutely. And with cancel culture, I think it's bad because there's no, first of all, it's a judgment, and we're basing it on what is acceptable today. Right. And, even when you watch movies, recently, like many people, I watched the new Matrix movie, right? And the first movie came out in like 1999. If you watch movies around 1999, the language and some of the jokes, and people would be offended.
Yes.
But it's really a reflection of what we found acceptable then. And I feel like we're trying to we're trying to I don't know if we are trying to cancel things because we want to remove all bad language and all bad thoughts and all bad ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know if that's necessarily good, because then we become numb.
Right. I agree with you. I think it's also similar to if you look back and at Abraham Lincoln and Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. It's like, okay, everyone, Abraham Lincoln, Emancipation Proclamation, freed the slaves. Do you think Abraham Lincoln didn't have slaves? Maybe not as
Well, we have
because,
to understand the history of our country,
right. And to your point though, is like in the 90s and with the movies and stuff, it's like you can't crucify him or George Washington, or I mean, they're trying to take down the Lincoln Memorial when we were in DC in 2020. And I'm like, that was the acceptable thing back then. He just did less of it, I guess, and did more to help prevent it and remove it with freeing the slaves and everything like that. But it's like, to your point of like the movies, it's like at that time, that was what everyone was doing, not just one person, if that makes sense.
Right. You're absolutely right. It's and we always have to be careful with politicians, because
Oh my God.
geez, they're all problematic. They're all problematic.
Everyone.
But you're absolutely right. It's shows that I used to watch when I was younger, like All in the Family and things like that. Like
the
that
Jeffersons.
language that would never fly today.
Never.
But we have to acknowledge, we have to be able to sit in our own filth.
Right.
We have to be able to watch these things and absorb it and be okay, and then sort of move on. And I don't know if and I may be getting it wrong, because I really don't keep up with like cancel culture and things like that. So
no, you're right. You're not getting it wrong. You're getting it right.
Yeah, I think that, one, there's no stopping it, and two, you're going to be canceled because we've all said something. Every single one. We can't to put everybody on a platform of this perfection is just ridiculous.
It's impossible.
It's to say that we've all said, I've said 10 stupid things in this today.
Yeah. Someone's going to take this clip of me saying something about Abe Lincoln being okay to have slaves. And then next thing you know, I'm going to have.
And then I'm like, slaves, have them. It's going to be that. It's great. Yeah. It's going to be real great.
It's exactly right. You're so right.
But at the same time, I do appreciate sort of like younger generations being cognizant of language. It's important, but we can't just make it go away.
No. You can't punish the past. I think too, it's like you're right. Like I love like the younger generation. Like sometimes I'm like, I can't say this, I can't say that, whatever, fine, I'll do.
I do have a hard time with that now. I'm teaching. I'm like, I can't say these things.
I can't even imagine. And I'm the same way. Like if I adapt and I accept it for sure. But I get upset when like we try to punish like things that happened in the past, like the boomer generation and stuff like it's like that's just how they. Yes, it was bad in our eyes now. That's just how they did things then. We can't go back and fix it. All we can do is move forward and not do it again.
And we're doing something now that future generations are going to be like, I cannot believe they did that. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the reality. It's like, whenever we're looking backwards, we have to remember someone's going to be looking backwards on us. Right.
Yes. And that's a great point.
We can't, say that. It's baffling to me. So, and plus, like, I can't be that outraged at everything, right?
I don't have the time. Same. I'm just like over it. Like sometimes I used to get very emotional in things in politics. I'm like, this is not going to get me anywhere. I can't control it. I'm not going to spend any energy or space on it.
Yeah. All these, there's, I can't keep up with like the new terms and things like that. So like, keyboard warriors or whatever. I don't know. Just
do you. Just leave me alone. Just don't be a serial killer.
Really, it's like just
full circle.
Don't be weird about that stuff.
Right.
Don't do weird stuff like that. But so it's, oh my God. You can see I'm a talker. So
this is great. I love it.
I don't know how you're going to cobble together an episode, by the way, because I'm just,
I'm not, I don't edit anything. I do an intro, which I already shot. I trim the front and the back just to make sure all the fluff that we had. and I just let it go. I don't like to doctor anything. It's just natural, raw. That's it.
Yeah, so now when with teaching, they want, and they meaning university administrators want us to sort of have these record these little mini lectures to post for our students, and I struggle with that because often I will talk and it's free form,
Right.
like I'm much better in person. There's a dynamic that being in front of the classroom or being with students, you get the synergy that you don't get on screen.
So much different.
And what I find is like if I'm trying to do like a mini lecture to myself in my living room with like cats fighting in the background,
Right.
I'm one dimensional, and listening to myself, I'm trying to cut out all the ums and the and the
No, I gave that up a long time ago. I'm just like, I say I
yes,
halfway through a thought, I'm going this way, and
exactly.
It is
So
what
now,
it is.
yeah, so it's funny because after doing some TV and after podcasts and listening to that, I can't judge anybody for what they say because I'm like, I would not have said that any better.
It's that's why I like this longer form stuff anyway, because you can kind of like flesh out a lot of like difficult topics and stuff like that versus like on a TV show, like you said, you 10 hours of filming, you got 3 minutes of playtime. Like that's not going to get your point across. In the magic of editing, they can make you sound like anything.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, it's like sort of understanding that process. Now, we talked about so much more that didn't make it, that would have been so much more interesting. And that's one of the things that I'm like, what happens to all that, because even when, I did Invisible Monsters, I was like, well, I might be in one episode. I have no idea. Because they don't know, and you don't know what the show is going to look like. You're just going in and you're just doing an interview on your particular piece, and you walk away and you don't see how it's going to like weave in. And I'm sure like that, but I didn't know that because I'm not a TV person. I'm an academic person. I'm an academic, so for me, I think the hardest part was like having sort of like these sound bites that you say that are very quick and to the point, and that's something I'm working on.
So you got to get well, that's what I'll do with this. For example, I'm going to take this long form, I'll post it. I'm going to take the audio, I'll post it, and I'll send you that. But I'll chop these up to about 10 to 15 different 2 to 7 minute clips to put on my second channel with just clips, and then I'll take those clips and make those 60 seconds to throw on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that. So I doctor that, but I don't doctor the full thing.
Oh, that's great. I can go see a TikTok now.
Yeah.
My cat's fighting.
You don't even have Facebook. You got to get TikTok. But
I have it because I'm trying to monitor my stepdaughter watches on TikTok. So I'm like, I gotta know what the kids are doing. I know what she's saying,
what are your kids doing? No, get TikTok because you'll be on there for sure. I actually got shadow banned. Speaking of cancel culture, I had like 10 million. I grew mine ridiculously in like about a month, over 10 million views. I was 30,000 followers, 500,000 likes, and like it literally in a very small amount of time. And then people will get butthurt because I'm talking sometimes about controversial topips, and they started, submitting forms for me and like kind of like saying I'm going against community guidelines. Now I have to start all over. I'm starting a new TikTok this week.
So. Oh, is that how that works? So it's interesting. I mean, that's such a different world for me. I kind of like living in a world where I don't have to. I mean, I do have to worry about like, likes per se, but I mean, like, I don't, that the whole social media with like the likes and subscribing and everything like that. I'm not paying attention to that.
Yeah,
but I'm paying attention to the people that are paying attention to that. Does that make sense?
No, you kind of have to from a distance because it's frustrating because these are also businesses, so like they can.
Well, that's the thing. You could ruin somebody's livelihood, and or there are people that are legitimately probably that clearly need to be canceled. I will say, like for R. Kelly, like that's somebody that
100% Weinstein, cancel it.
But I mean, we are all, 5 minutes away from a terrible gaffe,
Oh,
where all of us are, every
literally
single one.
100%. That's why I'm like, when I'm getting, not that I'm canceled, but I'm like, so they have the For You page. I don't go on, I can't get, my stuff doesn't get promoted on that page anymore, which is where new people find you, which was also
Oh,
filtering people to my YouTube channel, which was growing it very quickly. But now it's like, oh, someone got upset and hurt. Now they're like, just like, oh, well, I don't agree with this person or what he said. I'm just going to submit a claim and let TikTok do its thing.
right.
So,
And then you never have to think about that thing again. And then,
right.
so how do you grow? Now, I mean, there's such a, like there's very, hate speech is one thing,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know, again, I think I'm living in this world of like academic freedom in which we should be able to say things, and we should be able to sit with that horrible thing and maybe have a dialogue about it, because that
Right.
really is how we connect and we grow.
Right.
And when we push it away, I think that is when we do ourselves a disservice. And I think I've made myself slightly unpopular in the view that, sort of, with this a movement of like defunding police. It's like, well, you can't disconnect yourself from policing and push it away. It's not going anywhere.
No.
You can't. And actually, looking at research, you make policing worse when you take away funds.
Mm-hmm.
You actually increase the likelihood in some cases of police making poor judgments because they're working longer. And the bureaucratic system is such that it immediately, the most important things get cut first. So training, diversity hires, those things that make policing better.
Right.
They know what they're doing, and so,
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
and so those are the things that you need: education, training, diversity hires. Those are
Yeah. You
things
need
that are going to be
more of
cut
those
first.
things.
And we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's like, it's the, when I think Jocko Willink said it, like the Navy SEAL, when he was on Rogan one time, he talked about defunding the police. He's like, no, they need to be like Navy SEALs basically and be great at everything. And also he was saying how, like, if you defund them, if you make it hard, and it's like the most hated position on the planet right now, who do you think is going to become cops? Who do you think is going to want to become cops? These
Well,
people that we
yeah.
don't want cops.
Well, yeah. Well, the reality, I'm so for reallocating sources to community. And like, nobody, like everybody's like, yes, communities need more mental health services. Absolutely. And if it's reallocating budgets, fine. But unfortunately, it sort of got politicized into something different. But I think
Mhm.
that the key thing is that even academics, even very smart people, I think they don't realize that you can't get rid of police in the United States. They're written into our laws.
Right.
It's like,
Right, yeah.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
you just can't.
You can't just
There's
take
no
it away.
place in the US they're not allowed to go. And there's religious exemptions. Like, no, well, I mean, they can get a search warrant eventually,
Mhm.
but like you can't. And so by cutting the cord and disconnecting yourself, you're going to make it worse,
Right.
right?
Right. 100%.
So I mean, we've got a long ways to go, and policing is really complicated, and especially if you're like a person of color and you're teaching about policing, it's definitely
It's like, what are you doing?
hard.
That's not, you're not supposed to be saying, no, I can't
Yeah,
even
yeah,
imagine.
and unfortunately, because I've worked with police for so long, I just like I see both
You
sides,
get
and
it.
it's very touchy. But I also see the reality is that they're not going anywhere. We
No.
cannot get rid of them unless
Yeah.
we change the laws.
Right. Right. Which would take forever. And I just think
Yeah, no,
people don't see that.
I'm like, you see Congress,
They're made to go slow.
I mean, well, I call them Antiques Roadshow at this point, because there's nothing,
It's literally, the government was it's not supposed to be efficient. It's,
Yeah.
it's so, but
Yeah.
well, man, hey, we talked for over 2 hours.
Oh my God, I've got to feed these cats
Yeah,
and
these cats,
myself.
they're like dying fighting each other. But hey, Khadija, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was a blast. I hope, yeah, no, I had a good time talking your ear off. So I
No,
hope.
this is great. No, I love this because it was great. We're bouncing stuff off of each other, and I learned a lot. I know my viewers and listeners will really enjoy this. They like this kind of stuff. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you, you know?
Oh God, that's right. Because I'm just anti-social with the social media. You have to go to like the school website. But I mean, there's a couple more things I'm doing with television that'll come out soon, and that'll be interesting. And usually when that, I mean, just people have to. I'm going to make people work to find me. They just
Well, I'm going to put all your links in the description.
Yeah, all 2 links, you know.
Yeah,
Absolutely, you know. Yeah, do that. I do have a Twitter account, you know.
You do. I followed you.
I do. Yeah. Oh, okay. So I haven't checked it in a while.
Thanks for following me back.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just, you know, yeah, I have a Twitter account there. You can stalk me at school. Just do it the hard way.
Yeah, just not the old school Ted Bundy style. No, just kidding.
You know where to find me.
Don't kill Khadija. But yeah, thank you again. And that's another episode for the E4 Explicit Podcast. We'll see you next time. And right now they're doing a buy one, get one free plus free shipping, the 30-day money back guarantee, and a lifetime warranty. On top of that, you, my friends, will get 10% off of any product, of any purchase on their website by using explicit10. Use the code explicit10 and you'll get 10% off your entire purchase from bravoconcealment.com.